All right. All right. Can everyone see this well? Okay, great. Great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Tell you a little bit about the active transportation plan. Uh, so this active transportation plan for Dane County will be the MPO's first to focus on the needs of all active transportation users. It is an update to the MPO's 2015 bike plan and expands on its scope to encompass other modes, including people traveling by foot and using wheelchairs or those using micromobility devices like skateboards and e-scooters and so on. We will be identifying the locations with the highest need for new paths, sidewalks, and other bike and pedestrian facilities. We'll also be identifying the most critical barriers, things like high-speed roadways and difficult intersections that make it harder to get around without using a car. We'll also be reviewing local laws regulating the use of bicycles, scooters, and skateboards that may have limited impacts on safety, um, but that can dissuade people from choosing to use active modes. So these include things like prohibiting bicycles on the sidewalk, jaywalking laws, and bike helmet laws. These types of laws sometimes can be enforced in a discriminatory manner, but even when they're enforced even-handedly, these fines pose a greater hardship on low-income people and can snowball into much bigger penalties if they're left unpaid. So anyway, building on these various analyses, the plan will offer a unified vision to guide the future of active transportation in Dane County, and will help communities identify potential infrastructure projects and policy changes that improve safety and convenience for people traveling by active modes. We're right about at the midpoint of our work on the plan right now. Last year, we started our pre-planning process and engaged consultants to help us with some of the pieces that could be completed early on, including the development of survey questions. Other ongoing work of maintaining our bike and pedestrian data is also going to be a foundation of this plan. Earlier this year, we began coordinating with MPO communities. We're working very closely with the city of Madison as well as Middleton and Fitchburg, which are all working on related plans right now. We're currently promoting our community survey and interactive map via our website, social media, signs around town, and at in-person events throughout the MPO area. Once the survey closes in July, we'll begin analyzing the survey data we collected, as well as the data shared with us from the city of Madison and other communities. We will also be sharing relevant information that we've gathered from our survey with partner communities. Before developing our draft and final plans, we'll review recent local plans from communities in the area, as well as the draft plans that are currently under development to make sure that any planned paths and other plans they have are accurately reflected in our own plan. As I mentioned, we're deep in the public outreach portion of our plan development right now. We're going to events throughout the area using social media and signs to promote the survey. However, we're not conducting focus groups ourselves to contact hard-to-reach populations. Instead, we're partnering with the city of Madison, which has hired EQT by design to facilitate discussions with groups in disadvantaged neighborhoods. We'll be sharing the results of our more broad-based survey with the city of Madison, and they will be sharing the results of their focus groups with us. While much of the GIS data work that'll be required for the plan is ongoing, we're also going to be working with MPO communities, make sure we're incorporating all of their planned facilities into our geo database so it can be reflected in the plan. We've also contracted with a company called Ecopia, which will be using AI to analyze aerial photography to identify any paths and sidewalks that might be missing from the data that we have. This is going to be particularly useful to identify missing sidewalks and new curb ramps. We're also working on drafting the text of the document and integrating the work that our consultants have already completed. Earlier this year, the Traffic Operations and Safety Lab, the TOPS lab at UW-Madison, completed a report assessing the accuracy of different pedestrian and bike count technologies and detailing the way bike and pedestrian volumes fluctuate according to time of day and weather conditions. TOPS Lab is also currently working on another study that'll help us learn more about the circumstances and frequency of bicycle and pedestrian crashes that are not reported to the police. The MPO's active transportation plan for Dane County is being coordinated with area communities and is going to complement their plans. Our plan will be a comprehensive document stitching together more specific local plans and providing some direction for communities that currently lack their own plans for walking and biking. As we move forward, we're coordinating and sharing information with staff teams working on these issues in nearby communities. As I mentioned, MPO staff is tabling events throughout the county right now to help spread the word about our survey, and staff are also available to make presentations to groups upon request. Along with the survey, the MPO has an interactive map where respondents can identify problem locations or facilities that they'd like to see duplicated elsewhere. So far, we've received over 2,600 survey responses and about 2,000 comments on our interactive map. If you want to find more information about the ATP, you can find it on our website or on social media, and you may see us at more events between now and the end of the month. Unfortunately, we don't have results from our survey to share with you yet. I want to end by hearing some of your thoughts about bike parking downtown. Research has shown that a lack of secure covered bike parking limits the number of people who bike. When a bike is stolen or vandalized, riders often replace it with a cheaper version that does not work as well, which may lead them to ride less, or they just may stop riding entirely. Lack of secure bike parking is an even bigger problem for e-bikes, which are more expensive and are harder to carry up the stairs to store inside. While covered bike parking systems in the past normally consisted of a box for 1 or 2 bicycles, newer designs such as the Unipod shown here on the right offer larger capacities and more visual appeal. So I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on the state of bike parking downtown, as well as any other questions or comments you have about the active transportation plan.
All right, Alan?
For bike parking, I think we need more bike parking downtown. You need, more bike parking in many parts of the city. I think that is that's maybe, at least from my perspective, the kind of most glaring shortcoming in the infrastructure. Personally, I like covered bike parking when the weather is bad. But to me, the shortage of covered bike parking is not as extreme as the shortage of any bike parking. And just so many times you're just kind of jerry-riggering, looking for a light pole or looking for a traffic sign or that kind of thing. The other thing that shows up a lot is you'll have bike parking, but not easy access to it. You got to go up over a curb to get to the bike parking, as opposed, as opposed to a ramp. So I personally would like to see that being a priority.
Yeah, more ramps. That's good point. More access to it. And Jay?
Oh, Jay, you're muted.
Okay, thanks, Bill, for the report. Some thoughts on bike parking is that in addition to exploring technologies like new kinds of covered parking and stuff like that, I wonder if we have looked at principles of crime reduction through design and in terms of lighting, placement, so that would-be thieves feel like they're under scrutiny. And what, how can we create an inventory of those kinds of methods that may or may not be lower cost, but that we could then possibly even utilize to improve the existing bike parking, the security of the existing bike parking.
That's a great point.
As a regular biker, like I bike everywhere these days, I just want to roll up to the nearest bike, I want to roll up, slap my bike, the lock on my bike at a rack. I don't want to I don't want to mess around with containers and stuff like that, because it's just going to slow me down. And so anything that we can do from an environmental design perspective, I think is really important. The other thought I had is getting back to the active transportation plan and assessing various community regulations and things, is there still seems to be new buildings going up, at least in Madison, where the bike parking is not convenient. So this is partly a question for you, Bill, partly a question for the city, is when was the last time we reviewed the bike placement guidelines for new projects? When I was on UDC, which was, like 12 years ago now, I had to do a lot of pushing for new projects to get the bike parking up close to be convenient and stuff. And I don't know whether the regulations have been updated since then to make that a requirement, but I hope that the city will review that and make sure that, new bike parking and new developments gets primo location.
Yeah, good.
Thanks. That's it.
All right, Dave.
Sure, find it kind of echoing what Jay just mentioned. As a recovering former elected official, one of the things that local municipal governing boards do when a large development is planned, and I'm going to make an analogy here, but if a municipality is entertaining a developer's proposal for 50 homes or 100 new homes, the local municipality will say, okay, fine. This area will be park space. This area on your plan will be public space, and so on. And that's good. And that's what municipal bodies do. But when a 150 unit apartment complex is proposed in downtown Madison, I don't think that level of you will do this as part of your proposal takes place. And those public areas that should be part of large developments like that would include good, easy access, roll up to bicycle parking.
Oh, you just cut off there, Dave.
Oh, you cut off? I cut off?
Your mic went out, it looks like.
Oh, well, just the thought that when municipalities like the city of Madison approve large,
It's not here.
can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. It's when the city approves large apartment complexes in downtown Madison, just like they do when they approve a 50 or 100 unit housing complex on the edge of town, they should designate public spaces, and those public spaces should include easy access, roll up to bicycle parking.
I think Bill lost his audio. So I don't know, Zia, if you have anything to add to that comment from Dave.
Hello.
No, I mean, I know that there's a certain level of that does happen with developments, but I'm not familiar enough with, the development, that detail of the development process. I mean, I know that there are the bike parking requirements that go into new developments. I think those have been reviewed fairly recently, kind of as part of the TDM program development process a couple of years ago before that program was launched. But yeah, it's a great point.
Bill, do you have
I was-
audio back?
Yes, I do now. Yeah, that was
Okay.
it. Just went out and came back. No idea what went wrong or what went right there.
All right. Do you have anything to add to the comments?
No, I kind of missed some of that, but I did catch that. I caught the beginning of Dave's comment there that it'd be good to require developers to include more bike specific type of infrastructure, like they do for parks and so on. So I'm sure Zia can fill me in on the details there.
All right, Jay.
All right, thanks again. My question is, what is being done to require, it seems like we are still building sprawl. We're still building use segregated neighborhoods where, a bunch of new houses go up, but nothing to walk or bike to, and oftentimes without transit. So it's a two-part question. What is being done and what can be done to require that when new neighborhoods get built, they're built in a complete way so that the very first residents have a place to walk and bike to? a corner store, a drugstore, and things like that. I know that we allow complete neighborhoods to be built these days, but it seems like we're not requiring complete neighborhoods to be built. So what are the legal tools that we have as communities to require these complete neighborhoods to be built? And yeah, that's basically it.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Anybody else have any ideas on that? That's certainly something good to look into.
I was going to say, I think that's a good question for our partners at CARPC, who
Mhm.
are our land use folks.
Yeah.
I mean,
Can
it's
I chime
definitely,
in on that?
there you go, Bill. Yeah, go for it.
All right. Well, yeah, first of all, CARPC is not land management. Their job is environmental and stormwater protection. And anytime they get involved in trying to do land management, land use management, they're really leaving their established lane. But second of all, you can require city could require a developer in a new subdivision to create parcels that are of a size that would be conducive to something other than a single family house. But that's about it. The government can't require investors to invest in whatever business you want to see there in a new neighborhood.
What about, I realize that specific things can't be required, but I wonder what other communities have done either in the United States or in other developed countries that really push the creation and encourage the creation of those kinds of things. I wonder if, maybe there's an appetite for, whenever a new development goes in, a certain portion of it gets converted into a land trust that's put to, like around transit oriented, in land that would become transit oriented development once transit gets there, put it into a land trust so that is then managed with community benefits in mind. I know these are big ideas, but if we don't think big now, then we're not going to have anything in place when the political environment is more conducive, 5-10 years from now. So I hope that we can take every opportunity to think big, even if these are just ideas that get put into ideas for the future, but get people thinking about them and start looking at the legal framework that would allow some of these big ideas to be implemented. That's it. Thanks.
Good. Thanks, Jay. Any comments on that?
Well, I guess I'll throw one out there is that you're talking about like a large parcel of land being subdivided for a new residential subdivision. If you require the developer to buy all the land and then set aside a very large chunk of it that they can't do anything with, give it to a land trust or whatever, then that cost of that part of the land has to be recovered from all the other land. So all the housing in that new subdivision has to somehow get more expensive in order to cover that expense. So unless the government is willing to purchase, or some nonprofit or somebody else is willing to purchase that part of the land, then this has an effect of driving up the cost of housing. So, then the question is, where are we going to get that resource from? I'm not disagreeing with Jay's idea, just like where are we going to get the money from other than the developer who will pass it on to pay for that, to set aside that land so that it's there for future transit-oriented development.
I think that's a really good point, Bill. And I just know that there are a lot of creative financing tools that have been developed all around the world, including in the United States and then also in Europe. It would make sense, I think, to look at those creative financing methods to prevent, like, the cost being passed on to the you know, the new homeowners and landowners and stuff like that. But there are such financing tools around, and so I think it would be good for us to figure out a way of looking at those creative financing tools and start figuring out which can apply to our area here.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Any other questions for Bill? Otherwise, I did have one question. Are you seeing an increase in the bike and pedestrian accommodations from the surrounding communities and the connections throughout Dane County?
I think so. I mean, I am always contacting all of the communities to find out about the new bike lanes and bike paths that they put in at the end of every construction season. And certainly, some communities have just been really building out their networks fast. I mean, DeForest has an amazing multitude of bike paths, as does Middleton and Fitchburg. And we're getting, I think we're getting much closer to bridging that gap with Sun Prairie. That is really challenging. Feels like there's paths that are starting to really connect that much better. So I think the network is getting a lot better. Of course, we're still some of our big path projects like the Lower Yahara River Trail and the Cap City Glacial Drumlin Trail. Those have been kind of thwarted by the interactions with the railroads and the Office of the Commissioner of Railroads that has is not enabling them to get the railroad crossings that they need to make the connections. I'm actually meeting with the Commissioner of Railroads on Tuesday, along with Kirsten Finn, the Executive Director of the Bike Fed, and Sam Herheim, who works for KL Engineering and has worked on some of these projects. And we're going to talk to them a little bit and see if we can sort of nudge them towards being a little bit more accommodating towards the path projects. But we'll see what happens there.
Can I jump in, Bill? I really second that. I think that the Commissioner of Railroads has been an awfully big problem to the path network. I mean, you see it with the Cannonball Path was glaring.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it would be worthwhile for people who are involved in, designing and building, especially bike networks, but transportation networks, to come up with a strategy to deal with OCR issues. I personally think the city screwed up terribly with how they handled the Cannonball Path approval. But just recognize what an obstacle and how much power the railroad commissioner has, what the attitude is of the railroad commissioner, and really put a lot of work into coming up with the most effective possible strategy, whether it involves lobbying, whether it involves, the railroad commissioner is appointed by the governor, to influence that, because I personally view that as a big problem. It's the other big problem is the state law prohibiting eminent domain. That's a tougher nut to crack because you've got to get bills through the legislature. This shouldn't be quite as tough a nut to crack, but it's really an impediment.
Yes, Alan, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think from what I have heard, and I'm kind of new to this the railroad, these type of railroad interactions, but it sounds like the staff often stays from one administration to the next, and a lot of those folks have been there for a long time, and that these rulings may be made by a administrative law judge and then sort of blessed by the commissioner himself. So as I understand it, often the commissioners themselves are not railroad experts, don't necessarily have a background at all in this kind of thing. So it'll be interesting if he's whether he has thought about this stuff, how much he is in line with actually what these decisions are that are being made in his name. I don't know. So we'll try and get to the bottom of that if we can.
Yep. that's a fair point, but he is in charge.
Yeah,
So,
right, absolutely. So
even
hopefully,
recognizing that the genesis of the decision comes from staff, he doesn't, he's got authority. He's got final
Yeah.
authority.
that is the message we're gonna try and convey to him when we meet with him. So let's see what happens.
All right, any other questions?
Steve Whalen has his hand up.
Yes, Stephanie, I had a comment, comment and just a suggestion to Bill, a connection. So commenting on Alan or Jay's comment about how we do better with bigger development and connecting with pedestrians and vehicles. Bill, we heard yesterday from the executive director at the Dane County Coliseum and the work that's being done at the Alliant Energy Center, and talking about the private-public partnership opportunity that's going on there. So instead of saying we can't do that, it's too expensive, how do we set aside land for bikes and for access? I think that's a great opportunity to connect that area where there's going to be mixed use development, housing and retail potentially, as well as, you know, a great venue for folks to go to hear music and see sporting events, and connect it better to the hotels across the street and connect it better to the downtown area. There was talk about a pedestrian bridge over top of John Nolan Drive because it's so hard to get across the street there. So and then getting over to the lake and the lake project that Alan's leading up, and how we connect our city better. And I think private-public partnerships, while it sounds like the silver bullet, in a lot of ways can address these issues for transportation as well as development and places for people to live.
Great, thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Bill, did you want to add another comment about, from what you have in the chat? Bill Connors?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the too many bills on this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I forgot to mention there is a tool that cities can and do use to set aside, essentially effectively set aside land for out in the hinterlands for future denser development along areas where they think there might be someday be transit, and that is through their own land use plans. So if there's a future land use map in an area plan or a neighborhood plan that says that a certain level of housing density is required in a particular part of a envisioned new neighborhood, and the developer comes along and says, I want to rezone this for low density development, the city should not grant that rezoning because it's not consistent with the plan, and state law requires consistency with the plan in order to rezone. So there is a method that local governments use, and if you look out at the area on the far east side, just north of the interstate, around Sprecher Road, Reiner Road. If you go north of the interstate, it's called Reiner Road. In that area there is a plan that's been in place for 20 years or something like that calls for a fairly dense pocket of development near the interstate, near those bigger intersections, and then it fans out to lower development, lower density development. So the developer literally can't get rezoning that isn't consistent with that plan. The flip side is maybe the land doesn't get developed at all for a long time because that dense development doesn't make much sense, and the developer doesn't want to hold that land. So again, you get to the point, the kind of question about who's going to pay for holding that land.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Any other questions for MPO Bill? Or for Bill Connors, if we have questions for him.
I had one question kind of going back to the bike parking. Does anybody know what's happening with the Madison Bike Center at the Wilson Garage, or the former Madison Bike Center? Because that seems, I know that's not what it was initially entailed to be, but it seems like an opportunity for pretty good, secure, covered bike parking.
We were just wondering about that the other day, talking about that. So yeah, I don't have any information on that myself.
The last update that I have, and I don't remember who it came from, it might have been Alder Verveer, could have been someone from planning, could have been that walker. Sorry, was that was most likely not going to be moved forward as a bike center. That it was that the first look was to see if any city needed it for a space, and then if not, that it would go into the normal private market for rental. But I'm 99% sure it's not going to be a bike center.
Jay?
Who owns that that part of the building?
City of Madison.
Thank you.
For that's, I'm 99% sure on that. I'm pretty, yeah, I'm positive it's Madison. It's part of the parking ramp, I believe, as part of the structure.
So I just want to remind people some deep history on that space. When it was first, it was talked a lot about at DMI, at least in the bike committee, when the bike committee was active. And I don't know how much the transportation committee got their fingers involved in this, but when the building designs first came out, there was an enormous space for the bike center, and then it just got whittled down smaller and smaller with each iteration, and the concern was that it was going to become too small to be an effective space. And I feel like the design challenges that the vendor had going into this suggest that that was a valid concern. And I mentioned this mainly for forward-looking purposes, in that when we are trying to do something new and creative like that, we need to make sure that it doesn't get whittled down by either legitimate concerns or people who just aren't enthusiastic about the idea, so that it becomes kind of designed to fail. I think it's kind of sad that it has failed, but it's not surprising. So, and this applies to any kind of new thing we try and do, especially in new things, because it's the new things that we don't really know what it's going to take to make them successful, because it's new. And we need to make sure that when we do something new, that we give it the room to breathe in order to have its best chance of being successful. So I just wanted to share that thought.
That's a great point, Jay.
Can I just comment on that too, Stephanie? Or not really comment, but ask a kind of question that maybe the answer is obvious. So the bike center is not happening, but is there indoor bike parking at that location for folks to, secure their bikes when they come into town? Or where is bike parking in the ramp? There's no, yeah.
I mean, it was there because the space, it's sort of basically all connected, right? There's a wall obviously between the two, but they're all sort of one and the same.
Yeah.
So no.
So there's not really a designated place for bike parking in the ramp.
No. I will certainly try to get an update, before the next meeting, a more robust update, because this is all just based on what I'm hearing and other conversations with folks, but it's been a while since I checked in on it. So Jay, it's a good point. Let me check in to see exactly what's happening, and for the next meeting, I'll for sure have an update, or make sure that someone's here from the city to give an update.
Just following up on that, kind of low-hanging fruit for bike parking would be having a kind of a well-defined, robust standard for substantial lit bike parking in ramps as they're built, so that it's easy to get to, it's obvious. If you're on a bike, you just kind of can know, all right, I pull into the ramp and I'll be able to see my bike parking that's kind of automatically covered, and you can fit a lot of bikes in very few parking spaces. Just kind of making that as easy and user-friendly as possible seems like a kind of low-hanging fruit part of the solution in every ramp.
Yeah. Thank you, Alan. Any other questions?
I wanted to add that, so Bill had a picture of some different bike parking facilities in his presentation. The Unipods were the ones that are like the big lit, can have advertisements on the side kind of infrastructure. And then there were the cycle hoops, I think you had a picture of, Bill, which are smaller covered bike parking, but they're less substantial, so they can fit in like a street parking, a car parking space. You know, you could fit, I think it's 10 to 12 bikes in a car parking space. But one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is learning more from a pilot that they're doing in downtown Minneapolis. They're going to be installing a mix of those uni pods and cycle hoops in various locations downtown. Their goal is to provide covered, safe, secure bike parking for workers who are commuting downtown. They were preceded by a pilot in Brooklyn that was focused on doing something similar with the smaller cycle hoops, but that was focused in residential areas. So those older, you know, which Madison has a lot of too, right? The apartment buildings where there's no bike parking, or if it is, it's in the dark basement. You know, you're bringing your bike 3 floors down to you know, some terrible spot. So I think it's interesting to think about both of those applications, residential and you know, work, and just see what we can learn. And especially being Minneapolis, they have a very similar climate to us. You know, how's that gonna go for them over the winter, things like that. So I think there's some interesting things that we can learn from that other cities are doing too.
Yeah, thank you, Zia. Any other questions? All right, well, if there are not any other questions, we'll give you guys 10 minutes back on your Friday. Jason, remind me, on our next meeting will be a joint meeting with the Economic Development Committee.
Yes,
date?
correct. Yep. So we're actually kind of based on a conversation we had here with Justin Sturberg last month about the development that's happening in and around the east-west bus rapid transit line, and what's happening with future bus rapid transit line. So we're going to do that as a joint meeting with economic development. It most likely is going to be on the economic development meeting time, which I don't have right here. So, but I will send that out to you plenty in advance, so you have that information for the next meeting. Matt Meklajewski and a few other folks will be joining us from the city of Madison. So a good joint discussion. And then we do have a big discussion, which does involve transportation, at our next What's Up Downtown Breakfast, which is on a different day than normal. It's Tuesday, Tuesday, June 24th, a week and a half from now. We're going to be talking about the strategic plan for Madison, the one that we're working on with the city of Madison. So the mayor will be there, our consultants at MIG, Emily DeVore, our director of placemaking, and Megan Tuttle, the city's planning director. So please join us. Edgewater Hotel, 7:45 to 9 a.m. on the 24th of June. Yes, Jay.
I've heard something about this transportation plan with the city, and what I want to clarify is DMI a formal partner with the city on this, or on the actual plan, or are there two separate?
Yeah, so it's not a transportation plan. So it's a strategic vision plan for the entire downtown. And yes, so we're actively working in collaboration with the city of Madison right now. We're finishing up the scoping work as we speak, but we're directly talking to Megan Tuttle, Matt Wachter, and the team about coordination in our plan. So more of an economic investment opportunity analysis type of document with strategic planning work with MIG and an equity by design, and then coordinating efforts with the city's land use plan, or also known as the downtown plan, that was last done in 07-08. And that will, in 12. And then that will, there'll be a coordination, particularly in the beginning sections, on data, on community outreach. So a lot is happening right now, and we're going to sort of launch that effort on the 24th and really explain kind of what's moving forward. The mayor will be there, Megan Tuttle will be there, our team will be there as well. So an actual unique opportunity. We've never done this before.
That's really interesting. So it's a formal relationship, sounds like. And
Yeah.
one question, will there be two different work products, one from DMI
Yes.
and one from the city?
Correct. There has to be, yes. So the city has to have their own land use plan, right, which they
Right.
need to create with their processes.
Okay.
We'll, of course, would always be help informed by the whole public, including DMI. But our document, it's much more a private-led document. The city will certainly have a lot of say in it. Ours is going to be much more that sort of strategic planning, the overall planning, the visioning, that economics of what's going on in the downtown, because a lot of that has to do with the private side too. So yes.
So I encourage DMI. There's going to, as that process moves forward, there's going to be things that DMI, kind of pie in the sky stuff that DMI wants to do that the city's not going to be comfortable with. And I encourage DMI to keep that work in at least your final product, so that it doesn't get
for
lost.
sure.
Don't let the city push that
For sure.
off if the city's not ready for it.
I mean, not to talk about like control, because we are partners, but we control the private document, and then there is funding from the city. Don't get me wrong, there's about $150,000 in TIF funding, so it's not insignificant, but it's $1 million total raise that we're doing to do that work. And then the city that has to have their own document as well, the land use document. We should help inform that. They should help inform ours. But if there's things that we really want, particularly in the governance and financing model that that might be bigger than just the city, we're going to put those things in. And that's exactly where we're hiring a national consultant, right, to really look at national best practices in this work. We do have a very good local consultant, Vanderwall, who will be working with us, but MIG, we brought in because we want best practices. So there'll be yes, Jay, I completely agree. We don't want the big things to not be in there. That's the whole, I wouldn't say it's the whole point, but it's one of the biggest reasons that we're doing the work. So
thanks.
Yeah, great, Jay. Thank you. Yeah, Steve.
One more comment to add, and to suggest to Bill Holloway. So I had a really good conversation.
Great, I'm off the hook. Great.
No, well, it's also, I'm sure you're already talking. So I had a really good meeting yesterday or 2 days ago with Helen Bradley at B-Cycle, which is now called Bicycle Transit Systems. And they are based in Philadelphia. So as far as ideas for parking, bike parking in commercial areas in other cities, I definitely suggest you have conversations with Bicycle Transit Systems. And Helen Bradley is their business development leader nationally, and they have bike share all over the country. So B-Cycle or bike sharing, I need to stop saying B-Cycle. Bike sharing is definitely part of this component of bike parking, right, and bike use, and folks that don't have their own bike and use B-Cycles.
Right.
Bicycle transit system bikes. It is still called B-Cycle. You're right, Jay. So I don't have to worry about making that mistake, but they're owned by Bicycle Transit Systems, which was started in Philadelphia. And we could learn some stuff maybe from folks out east as well as other parts of the country.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
All right. Now we're down to 5 minutes back. Great conversation, though, as always. Really appreciate everybody's participation in this committee. So I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. All right. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.